Coworker put in false complaints about me to HR, said, "I'll make you quit." I collected evidence of his lies, reported him, and got him blacklisted from every company in the industry. When I started my job at Keystone Precision Tools in Akron, Ohio, I thought I had finally found a place where I could settle in, work hard, and build something stable. It wasn't the flashiest job, but it paid the bills, and the work itself was challenging in a way that kept my mind busy. I was a production planner, responsible for keeping schedules tight and ensuring we had what we needed to keep the machines running. It wasn't a role where mistakes could slip through unnoticed. If something went wrong, it cost the company thousands. But I liked that kind of responsibility. It kept me sharp. What I didn't expect was to run into someone like Fergus. Even now, saying his name makes my jaw clench. Fergus was in procurement, which meant we had to work together often. At first, I thought he was just one of those guys who liked to talk a little too much, laugh a little too loud, and make himself the center of attention. You know the type, always lingering in conversations that didn't involve him, cracking jokes that landed with a thud, and acting like he was the smartest guy in the room. Harmless, I thought. Annoying, but harmless. I was wrong. The first time I realized Fergus might be more than just an irritant was about 6 months into my time there. One morning, I got a panicked email from the plant manager asking why a critical shipment of parts hadn't arrived. Apparently, the delay was about to grind production to a halt, and everyone wanted answers. I dug into the issue and found out that Fergus was the one who had failed to place the order. Pretty simple, right? Mistakes happen. But when the topic came up in a meeting that afternoon, Fergus didn't just own up to it. Oh no, he decided to throw me under the bus instead. "I asked for the specs on that order weeks ago," he said, leaning back in his chair like he was delivering the State of the Union. "If the specs were wrong, how could I place the order? I can't work with bad information." I stared at him, completely stunned. Not only had he never asked me for specs, that wasn't even my responsibility, but the entire problem was on him. Everyone in the room turned to look at me, waiting for a response. I could feel my face burning, but I forced myself to stay calm. "That's not true," I said, keeping my voice even. "I wasn't involved in that order at all. Engineering sent the specs directly to Fergus, and they were correct." I checked. Fergus shrugged, acting like it wasn't a big deal. "If you say so," he muttered, like I was the one being unreasonable. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He'd lied about me, plain and simple, and I couldn't figure out why. It didn't take long to find out. From that day forward, Fergus seemed to make it his personal mission to undermine me. At first, it was little things. He'd accidentally leave me off important emails, conveniently forget to tell me about changes to schedules, and make snide comments about my work when he thought no one else was listening. I ignored it, figuring he'd get bored and move on. But then he escalated. One Friday afternoon, I got called into HR for what I assumed was a routine meeting. Instead, Maria, the HR manager, informed me that Fergus had filed a formal complaint against me for creating a hostile work environment. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "What?" I said, blinking at her like I'd misheard. "A hostile work environment? How?" Maria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Fergus claims you've been undermining his work and refusing to collaborate on projects." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I've done nothing but try to work with him, even when he's made it difficult." She nodded, clearly skeptical of Fergus's claims, but HR protocol meant she had to investigate. I spent the next 2 weeks combing through emails, gathering proof that I'd done my job correctly and that Fergus's accusations were baseless. The complaint was ultimately dismissed, but the stress of it left me rattled. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I got hit with another HR complaint. This time, Fergus accused me of sabotaging his work by withholding information about a vendor contract. Once again, I had to gather evidence to defend myself. Once again, the complaint was dismissed. But the pattern was clear now. Fergus wasn't going to stop until he'd driven me out. The third complaint was the worst. Fergus claimed I'd made inappropriate comments to him in the break room, comments that could have cost me my job if anyone had believed him. By that point, I'd had enough. I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore, I was going to fight back. I started keeping a record of every single interaction I had with Fergus. Emails, conversations, meetings, I documented everything. I also began talking to coworkers discreetly, trying to figure out if anyone else had experienced similar issues with him. To my surprise, several people came forward. Anita, one of the engineers, told me Fergus had once tried to blame her for a project delay by altering timestamps on emails. Samir, another procurement specialist, said Fergus had spread rumors about him to their manager, nearly costing him a promotion. The more I dug, the more dirt I uncovered. Meanwhile, Fergus kept up his campaign against me, oblivious to the fact that I was building a case against him. Every time he filed a false complaint, I'd counter it with hard evidence that proved he was lying. I also started CCing Maria on every email I sent to Fergus, ensuring there was a paper trail for everything. The turning point came during a mediation session HR arranged to address the ongoing conflict between us. Fergus walked in like he was about to win an Oscar, acting calm and confident. But when I started laying out my evidence, emails, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of his behavior, his confidence evaporated. He stammered excuses, tried to shift blame, and even attempted to accuse me of falsifying the evidence. But it was clear to everyone in the room that he was full of it. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Instead of apologizing or backing off, Fergus doubled down. He started spreading rumors about me around the office, claiming I was out to get him and that HR was playing favorites. I knew I couldn't let this continue. Fergus's escalation after the mediation session lit a fire under me. I was done playing defense. I wasn't just going to clear my name, I was going to make sure Fergus never pulled this kind of garbage on anyone else again. If he wanted to play dirty, fine. I could play smarter. First, I got serious about gathering evidence. I set up a folder on my personal drive titled Fergus Files and filled it with everything I had on him, screenshots of emails, detailed notes from our conversations, copies of HR complaints, and statements from coworkers who were willing to speak up. I also documented every lie he told in real time. If he contradicted himself in a meeting or tried to rewrite history, I wrote it down. I wanted a timeline so airtight it could withstand a courtroom. Next, I started quietly talking to people in other departments. I didn't badmouth Fergus directly, but I asked questions. Had anyone else noticed strange behavior from him? Did they have issues working with him? Turns out, Fergus's antics weren't just limited to me. He'd stepped on toes in accounting, ticked off people in shipping, and even managed to get on the bad side of one of the executives. Everyone had a story about Fergus, and none of them were good. But the biggest break came when I talked to AITA again. She told me something that made my jaw drop. A few months back, Fergus had bragged to her over lunch about how he fudged a vendor contract to get a little kickback. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, she just assumed he was lying to impress her, since he had a habit of making things up. But I saw an opportunity. I dug into the vendor contracts Fergus had worked on, cross-referencing them with emails and purchase orders. It took me weeks of late nights and careful research, but I found it, proof that Fergus had manipulated the terms of a major deal to overcharge the company and pocket the difference. He'd covered his tracks well, but not well enough. A few inconsistencies in the paperwork were all it took to unravel his scheme. Now I had him. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report and handed it over to HR, along with a formal complaint of my own. Maria's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "This is serious," she said. "We'll need to launch a full investigation." I nodded. "Take your time," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Inside, I was giddy. I knew they wouldn't just brush this under the rug. Fraud was a whole different ballgame. The investigation took about a month. Fergus must have sensed the walls closing in because he became even more unbearable during that time. He started spreading rumors that I was the one being investigated, telling anyone who would listen that I was on my way out. I ignored him. Let him dig his own grave, I thought. And boy, did he. When the investigation was complete, HR called Fergus into a meeting. I wasn't there, but I heard through the grapevine that he tried to play it cool at first, acting like the whole thing was a misunderstanding. But when they laid out the evidence against him, including the fraudulent vendor contract, he completely lost it. He yelled, he swore, he even accused Maria of conspiring against him. By the end of the meeting, he was escorted out of the building by security. But I wasn't done yet. Keystone Precision Tools has a tight-knit industry network. Word travels fast, and I knew exactly how to make sure Fergus wouldn't land on his feet. I shared my evidence with a few trusted contacts at other companies in our field, not gossip, just facts. I figured they had a right to know what kind of person they'd be hiring if Fergus ever applied. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Within weeks, Fergus's reputation was in tatters. The final nail in the coffin came when I got a call from a friend who worked at one of the biggest manufacturers in the region. Fergus had applied for a procurement position there, and during the background check, my friend had come across the details of his firing. "Don't worry," she told me. "We're not touching him with a 10-foot pole." It felt like justice. As for me, things finally started to turn around. With Fergus gone, the workplace became 10 times less toxic. I got a promotion 6 months later, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could actually enjoy my job. My colleagues treated me with respect, and I felt like I'd earned back my reputation. And Fergus? The last I heard, he was working as a cashier at a big box store across town. Apparently, he'd tried to get back into the industry but found out the hard way that no one wanted to hire him. I can't say I felt bad about it. He tried to destroy my career, and in the end, he destroyed his own. Some people might say I went too far, but I don't see it that way. Fergus played a dirty game, and I beat him fair and square. I didn't lie, I didn't cheat, and I didn't stoop to his level. All I did was shine a light on the truth. And if he's still out there somewhere, bitter and blaming me for his downfall, well, I'll sleep just fine at night.